Hey everyone, I am Ben Eubanks, Chief Research Officer for Lighthouse Research and Advisory, and I'm thrilled to be here today with Martin Smith. He's the Vice President of Global Solution Advisory at Randstad, and we're going to talk about internal mobility, growing our people from within, and how to make sure we're tapping into that internal talent that already exists in our organizations before we start to look elsewhere, because sometimes we inadvertently step over a great person, a great set of skills, a great aspiration for a key role in the organization, looking for an employee. And we're going to talk about why we could do that a little better potentially, and some good ideas and strategies for that. So Martin, welcome. So glad you're here.
Yeah, hello, Ben, and great to speak to you again. And yeah, looking forward to this. Is very close to my heart. So yeah, looking forward to having a conversation with you.
Yes, absolutely. So let's kick off really. As I told you previously, and the audience here knows, we do a ton of research here at Lighthouse, and we know that evidence for talent mobility is powerful. There's a lot of value to it. It's lower cost, lower risk. There's performance benefits, all those kind of things. And that you and I both know this is a hard thing to get some organizations to latch onto and really start using on a consistent basis. I'd love to hear from you. What do you think some of the big blockers are for the leaders out there listening in that might hold them back from pursuing talent mobility?
Yeah, what a great question to kick things off. Going to try and draw from a bit of experience over the last couple of weeks. We've had lots of workshops and sessions with clients, so I'll try and use sort of practical experiences wherever I can. I think it really starts with this, depending on what the organization is trying to achieve, because the barriers could come in different guises. So we had an organization last week that was looking to really promote internally, and therefore visibility was one of their key barriers. They couldn't actually get the visibility of the opportunities they've had across their business out to the employees they have within the organization. There were some technology issues. So that whole sort of lack of visibility, and also they worked in a very siloed mentality. So function to function, brand to brand. So they had some sort of challenges there to really get people engaged and linked into what opportunities they were advertising across their business, so the posting, etc. Right through to other organizations not knowing what skills that their people have within their organization. So they were trying to take a more proactive approach to mobility and found that difficult, because to take a more proactive approach, they needed to understand the skills that people had within their organization. So I think the barriers are really linked into where the organization is trying to get to, and therefore what they're trying to achieve.
The skills one's an interesting one to me, because it's almost like a ground up sort of way. Let's know what everybody can do, what they're about, so we can help them slot into other directions. And the difficulty, I think, for some companies too, is they think about the old fashioned succession planning, where we say, okay, Martin, we've got you, and we're going to put you over here on the chessboard, essentially. And Martin will be like, no, this is my path, my aspiration, my goal, my hopes for my career is this direction. And it doesn't take that piece into account. So it feels like to me, talent mobility is a little more of a blend of both of those things, both the employee's perspective and sentiment and approach, their hopes, but also what the company needs, trying to fill those two gaps together. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, totally. And I think we've talked previously about, if had a pound for every time you spoke to an organization that said they were moving to a skills-based model, you'd be relatively well off. And I think it's the talk of the town, isn't it? Lots of people are looking to move there, but equally lots of organizations are struggling with how to do that. I think you've hit an interesting thing there, that I think with all the organizations trying to move to that skills-based model and think about the skills, what I've noticed, they really need to understand the aspirations as well. They can't just consider the skills in isolation. To your point, an individual's aspirations and career aspirations are very different. If you ask 10 people, you'd get probably 10 different responses. So I think it's really important that you understand that everybody is different. There's an amazing book that I've been reading while traveling called Squiggles, Career Squiggles. It really resonated with me that careers now they're not the ladders that were there before. They're actually squiggles. They move in different directions. They flow. You learn and you move forward. So I think it's really important for organizations to consider that as part of the mobility journey.
All right, wonderful. I know that one of the other things we see and hear, and I'm sure you hear consistently as well, is we talked about some things like the approach the company's trying to take and the way they're trying to pursue mobility, but the culture too, like the way they believe, the way they act toward the organization, the things they value can also affect that, either positively, like we really believe in the value of this, or it could be a blocker if it's not a priority for them. You mentioned siloed mentalities, things like that. So Can you talk for a minute about what a culture of mobility looks like in practice so the people out there listening in can look for some of those cues potentially in their own organization?
Yeah, absolutely. This might be a bit controversial, but what I would say is that mobility is a component of what drives a good culture, but it's not the only part of it. I think we just need to step back sometimes because we're so caught up with what we're trying to drive as an outcome without actually thinking about it. And there'll be people that are a lot more well-rounded from positioning culture as within an organization, but it's a very complex thing. It has a lot of different components, a lot of moving parts. It's moving as the company grows, the pressures that it comes under. So mobility plays a significant role, but maybe change the lens slightly to development as a culture. And actually about looking through the lens of people, it's well researched, and we talked about this, that people looking for development as part of their career. But it has shifted recently, even in our own Randstad Workforce Monitor. They're looking for work-life balance is in comparison to reward even. So although career development and mobility, these are important things, they are part of a bigger strategy and a bigger solution. So I think we just need to consider things like that. Then it's about how do you think of the development side of things? Are learning and development, are TA involved in those conversations? Can you really build a flow back to the career squiggles? Is everybody having their say of where they want to get to, the development paths they have? So I think there's a lot of broader conversations that organizations are definitely having now. The other day where we had a client that had TA and learning and development and HR in the same room talking about mobility. It's happening more and more now because that's what should be happening. So yeah, very exciting times, I think.
What's interesting to me hearing that is we had done a little research maybe a year or two ago on mobility, and we asked an audience of TA leaders, how are you pursuing this? What are your metrics for success? All those kinds of things. Right. And we asked an audience of L&D leaders, a separate study entirely, to get those to the point and counterpoint. And what was interesting is in some areas they're aligned. Overall, they still see the same value of we're going to move people internally, move them up, we'll hire from within. They might call it something different, but they're still doing the same thing. Like you talked about, like developing, growing our people. But the ways that they measured success were different. And so having them in the same room to say, hey, at the end of the day, this is what we're caring most about. Oh, well, we care about this. Well, the end goal is still the same. How do we agree on those terms of what it's going to take to get there? How do we support each other so we're not feel like we're winning or you're winning? It's not a zero-sum game. The employee hopefully is going to win and the company's going to win in the long run. But I think that's a really interesting perspective. I'm glad you brought that in because depending on who is out there listening right now, depending on what role you're in, you may say, well, yeah, but mobility means this for us. Okay, that's great. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's probably a good idea to reach across the aisle, as you're saying, Martin, and have a conversation with your counterparts in TA or in learning or in HR to figure out what they care about, what their priorities are, because you might find a way to meet all of your needs and, again, meet the needs of the employees at the same time.
Yeah, agreed. And it was fascinating. And it really was for me and a number of our other sort of Randstad counterparts being in that room with L&D, because it also then means you can start changing the conversation, but changing the words. So somebody moving into a secondment to doing a gig to build some knowledge, experience, or maybe upskill themselves in that area is a really good way of using mobility as a platform to do that. So again, I think it's viewpoint, lens, think about who you bring into the room to have some broader conversations has worked really well for a number of our clients.
Okay, so we're talking about these perspectives, these different stakeholders in this bigger process. One of the pieces of mobility, when we start thinking at that higher level, like you're talking about, thinking about skills across the organization, how they're moving, is governance and policy and how we put these things around this to make sure that we have some structure to it, because we can't have Ben shows up one day and the next day he's gone. And we're like, where did he go? Like, well, he just moved. Like, he's somewhere else. Good luck. It's not that much of a free for all, but we also want to make sure the policies and things we have in place are not holding people back. So I'll share a quick story with you, but then I want to ask you a broader question about how companies should think about the policies and the approach there, because putting that structure around it can help to make it more visible, like you were talking about earlier, or it can potentially hold things back if they're limiting things. There's a healthcare organization. I was talking with a CHRO recently, and they said we had this weird problem where we had people that we were trying to go through our hiring process. We go to hire them, and it would flag them saying, this person's already an active user in your system. And what's going on here? They'd go and they'd look, and Ben had applied for a job. He was already an internal employee, but applied for a job as Benjamin. And they found out that the reason for this is their managers had to approve anyone looking for another role inside the business. It was a requirement for them to do that. And so they said people would go through the process, apply outside, get someone bought into them, get them the offer, and then they'd feel comfortable enough to go back to tell their manager or ask their manager if it was okay to move, because they didn't want to have to go over that hurdle. And it was this weird problem they were creating. They realized that the policies they put in place were kind of creating this weird dynamic there. So that's an interesting story, and one that tells us that there are some potential unforeseen challenges that come from throwing the policies out there. So I'd love to hear from you. Any thoughts, any ideas, suggestions for employers that are listening in, or things you've seen potentially on the policy side, or how to think through this from a government's perspective to help it have a little more structure and less just people can go anywhere they want, or they're just completely in control there?
Yeah, I'll touch on policy. I just wanted to comment on what you said there, because that's come up a couple of conversations that we've been having. And I think it's something sometimes in that whole development mobility is overlooked, is the role that the managers play. And I think we're seeing far more now around even using coaches effectively to support managers in having some very different conversations, in thinking about it slightly differently. Because what we've realized, and a lot of organizations are, that the manager is such a key pivotal role, because it could really enable mobility and development. Are they willing to have conversations with their employees and their team members to help them, support them, guide them? What is the next opportunity? Promote them through the business, versus those managers that we probably all know that are like, well, I've got a very big target, or I've got certain activities I need to do this year. I'm under pressure. Do I want to be losing one of my superstars from my team? And therefore, you've got that sort of hoard mentality sometimes of keeping talent there. So I think it's a really important component to consider how you support managers to have a slightly different conversation and viewpoint as well, I think, within those dynamics. Just commenting on the process bits, I think policy and processes are really important to, when I've got into mobility within an organization, those that are successful, and in their view, success is they are filling more roles internally. They are using mobility to develop new skills and future-proof the people they have in the business. The policies then and processes have to align. So people need to have visibility of what's available within their organization. Lots of organizations have policies around the timings. So somebody then has to be in the business for a certain amount of time before he's considered for his next move, is a classic. The other one is the performance measures, which I think are good, but you've got to balance that if somebody gets one mark down on a performance review a year ago, are they then considered for mobility, or do they have to wait for another year or so? Again, you've got these policies that sometimes are against building a culture of development and mobility. So what we tend to do is to sit down with the organization and look at their processes, but look at their policies that support that as well. Bring L&D back into the conversations about their learning interventions, bring the hiring policies to play as well. So again, it's an awful lot of work, but it really is rewarding if you get that correct.
We're talking about this at a very high level, the big picture from the company perspective. But I'm thinking, I've heard so many times, and you probably have too throughout your career, people who ended up in a role, wasn't the right fit for them. And someone saw that, hey, they would be really good at X instead of Y. And they adjust them and move them over, and they end up flourishing. And you talked about coaching earlier. And that's one of the things that I've seen be successful when employers are using coaches and supporting. When someone's got a performance issue, sometimes it's just because they're in the wrong role for them. We just move them over this other role, but having another perspective in that helps to see that and move them and have that sort of success long-term when we look for those chances to do it. So that's one of the things that popped in my head as I was thinking about this employee years ago we had that just kept struggling. What do we do? Is it a performance improvement plan, corrective action plan? Do we start like the final steps? Yeah. And one of the other leaders said, let's try them on my team and see what happens. We were doing very different work. And they ended up being a star performer on the other team just because they found a place where their skills, their interests, all those things lined up, like all the stars aligned perfectly. And so that's one of the other pieces in this that's interesting to me is we always think about the high performers, the person who's great, let's help them keep jumping up, stepping up. But some of the people who maybe aren't performing really well, but they have the potential to, we got to find them and help them unlock that. So the mobility piece, I think, ties into so many different positive areas like that. I'm glad you mentioned that piece on performance, because that's one of the ones that I'm like, I look for performance, but I look for the right attitude, the right mentality, the right aspirations we were talking about earlier. Those things fit into there too, not just like a point in time on performance and how they're doing today.
Yeah, and I think it would be, yeah, I don't think you can have a conversation about mobility development without actually having the conversation about coaching. And obviously I'm probably fairly biased about this, but because coaching had a massive impact on me personally. So I think if you can structure the coaching, definitely helps move the dial on mobility. It's again one component of that. But I think the organizations that are being successful with it are ones that actually invest the time in the conversations with their people. Again, the squiggly careers, it's difficult to navigate your way through those careers sometimes. And we also know that it's easier. Research states 41% of employees find it easier to find a job externally than internally. So back to that sort of challenge around visibility, but also it's just easier. So the processes, the policies, etc. But the coaching mentality really, really resonates. We work with a lot of organizations where we have our coaching structure in place to support those people because it helps those individuals find what we call their starting point, their red dot. Where is my career today? How then I can start to think about where I want it to go over the next 2 months, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, and actually think about then what's available to me internally. And those organizations that get this right help their employees to unlock that, but create the time for them to have a safe space and think about their career in that respect, and then help them navigate their way through. What are your career actions and help you to get to that point? What about your internal networking? What about the fact that you're developing yourself and you have to take ownership of your own career? So there's lots of different components. It's not just one, but a coach definitely will help you navigate your way through that.
Yeah, that's really intriguing to me. One of the things that, as you were sharing that a minute ago on the 40% stats, one of the things that stood out to me, we just finished a study recently on employee development and growth, as we're talking about here. And it was on frontline workers specifically, though. And one of the things that stunned me was that so many of the groups, construction, manufacturing, other industries, those employees said, I'd rather, if I had the choice, I'd rather look for a job internally if the company would just give me the opportunity. If they would just give me a chance, I want to stay here and grow more than I want to go somewhere else and grow and find another role. And so that sort of thing, as you said, like people can't find it. They want to find it, as we're seeing in the data over and over again. And so making it visible, as you mentioned earlier, is a great way to start out. Just simply, easily, let's make the opportunities available and visible. Let's know what the sort of little bit of governance around it, as you've talked about already, some ideas on that, like tenure in the role, things like that. But helping companies start to think through some of those practical first steps to doing that can lead to some pretty amazing outcomes if we're doing that and really focusing on it in a strategic sort of way. So
yeah, agreed. Do you know the interesting thing though, Ben, is that, and it's probably the most startling facts and research that I've seen this year so far for me, is we talked about the amount of employees that find it easier to find a job externally.
yes.
But there's also another stat that runs alongside that, which is 51% of hiring managers found it easier to hire somebody externally than internally. And I write them down constantly because they are opposing stats which are causing the problem. And they're just, when you put them both together, you've then got to think we're not making it easy for individuals to explore what their career internally looks like. And I think a good friend of mine that works with me said the other day, it's about speed and direction. If you think of the individual, you've got to help them find what is their career speed and career direction. And that could be finding a new job. That could well be, and it could be very quickly, or it could be in 2 years' time. But actually, it's really important that direction, because it might not be about moving job. It might be about gaining some skills to help them move for a job in 12 months' time. And that's becoming more and more apparent at the moment, that people aren't necessarily looking for a job to move to today or look at it as a promotion. They're looking at it to, how can I develop and future-proof my skills?
I don't want to derail us too much, but that brings up a question that I would love to ask you. So one of the things we find in the data is when we ask employers, do you have a separate process for if someone applies internally, they don't get the job? Do you give them feedback? Do you tell them about it? What do you do about that? And many times we just either don't tell them anything and they find out when someone else takes the job, or we just tell them, hey, you didn't get it. But there's nothing more practical and tangible. And you just talked about helping them figure out what those gaps are potentially. So any thoughts on that for how employers could do that better? Should they do that as a standard practice if someone applies internally? hey, Ben, you didn't get this role. Here's the 3 gaps that we saw between you and the top candidate. If you can work on developing these, here's some courses, or here's a coach we can put with you. Any thoughts on that piece of it? Because I feel like employers, again, sometimes they're like, oh, we didn't even think about that until suddenly it's here. And they don't have a good plan for how to do it well on a consistent basis for the people internally. And if it's a terrible experience for them, then they may not stick around. They may not ultimately leave the organization because it feels a little bit like just a no, and it's forever going to be a no, instead of no today, but tomorrow, here's the possibilities. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, again, great. It's so here's the thing. If an organization starts and their structure and strategy is about, we want to increase mobility, and an output of that is fill more internal vacancies with internal employees, you've got to have those opportunities available.
Yes.
Because if you don't, and you don't embrace that with the policies and the process and everything else, you're actually going to create more potentially of an attrition challenge for you as you go down this line, for exactly the reasons you've said. Because an internal person will have an expectation. They'll expect to get feedback, to your point. So it's very interesting when I'm in the room with the TA person at the moment, you say, right, over the last 2 years, what are the key things that you've invested in to attract and external talent to your organization? And the amount that they've invested in experience, hiring experience, candidate experience, the technology, the going through the process, they get feedback every step. There's lots of organizations that have done some amazing things with how they bring external talent into their organization. And then you say, okay, now apply the same question to how you're looking at helping your internal people, your employees. Bingo. Then there is, and even if you looked at it from a monetary investment perspective versus the time, the effort, the focus, it tends to be, again, different. So why aren't we investing in the employee experience and feedback and helping them go through that and linking to the... Now, there's lots of organizations that are doing that very, very well, but there's also lots of organizations that I'm sure you're aware of as well that are not doing it at the moment and have that opportunity. So I think it's that experience bit. You need to make sure that it's a life cycle experience. Why Randstad is so focused at the moment on being a true talent partner, because we believe that you have to go from into the organization, within the organization, and transitioning through the business. So it's a really important experience that you invest in.
That's a great example. I talked with a leader, a TA executive recently, and he'd worked for these different mid-size, high growth organizations. And he said, ultimately, like, our performance as a hiring team made the company or broke it, essentially, because we had to have enough people to staff these new openings, everything else. And one of the things that stood out to me is when we're talking about his strategy for hiring, he said, we had it down to a science. We knew exactly how many would come from referrals, how many would come from silver medalists who we had not picked the first time around. But he said one of our other key pipelines was internal talent. And we knew that for every 10 roles we opened, 1 role would be filled over time by someone who's inside the business. And so we started seeking that out and looking for, in every position we opened, like, we need at least 1 candidate from inside the business for this. And for them, that was their ratio, their number. It's different for any organization out there. Yeah. But they systematized this and had it as part of everything they were doing, and realized the value of these individuals. Just as you said earlier, like, a lot of hiring managers, they feel like, oh, well, I'd love to grow Martin in this role, but I know he's got this or that weakness. And we assume hiring someone outside the business, because that resume doesn't list any of their weaknesses on it, are going to be more capable and better. And we always, for some reason, still find out, oh, they did have something, they just didn't write it down. And in that case, I loved hearing that story from that organization, because they said, yes, sure, they have warts, they have challenges, they have issues like any candidate would, but we know what they are. At least we can at least counter for those, or know what would be a good fit for them or not, based on those things that they're struggling with. And so such an encouragement to me to hear that, and to hear you talking about some of these other organizations you've interacted with. They're saying, how do we bring these pieces together? How do we think about this critically? What's the outcome we're looking for? Is it just filling more roles internally? Is it, we want these people to stay with us long term? We hired them, all this effort and money goes into bringing someone in on the front end. Let's keep them as long as we possibly can. I call it the compound interest of a great employee. Like, they're appreciating day after day. They're more valuable tomorrow than they were yesterday. And as long as we can keep them and keep them performing, it's going to be a good outcome for them, again, a good outcome for us as an organization and employer overall as well.
Yeah. And don't forget, Ben, the background to this, and we talked a bit about coaching, development, and it's still entwined within the conversation and framing of mobility. Ultimately, you want an excited and an engaged workforce.
Yes.
that values that are aligned to your. I always say to organizers, think about actually why these components are important to you, because the amount of research, you only need to Google it to find out engagement, correlation to performance, and a number of other things, and it's all out there to be read, some very good scientific background. But there's this thing about engagement and the new thing about motivation. Somebody can be really highly engaged, but actually if they're not motivated to do these things and work with you and find their career, then because ultimately they have to take ownership themselves. The key thing here is you can go a long way, but you can't actually do everything for them. An individual has to have that motivation that wants to progress, to learn new skills, to increase their knowledge, their growth mindset, and those are the people that organizations want to try and hold on to. So therefore they need to be doing these things. So I think don't forget the performance metric of this, that this is why you're doing it, is to help drive your business and grow your business as well as your individuals.
Goodness. Great answer there. Okay. All right, so we're coming in here on the home stretch, and I'd love to ask you, we talked over some really good things. I've gotten some good notes from the conversation already, from some good practical ideas, and I'm hoping everybody else listening in has gotten some good notes as well. What other practical advice, what other sort of key things do you want someone to walk away from this conversation with that you think are critical if they're going to be successful in this? It could be doubling down on something you said already. It could be something else you haven't shared yet, or a combination of both. I'd love for you to give them kind of a parting bit of wisdom on, if you want to be successful, here's some things that you'd recommend based on all the organizations you've both worked with and supported in your role there at Randstad.
Yeah, I'll probably try and do both, and double down a little bit on some of the conversations, but also hopefully share something that I hope is of value. I think when we talk about, we mentioned earlier this career navigation approach and helping employees navigate their way through their career. It's tough. It's difficult sometimes for individuals to do that. So I think whether you have coaches internally do that, you have mentors, you have external coaches, whatever it is, people need support and they need nudging. Do not forget that the amount of organizations that I've seen that bring in technologies, which are really important and evolving all the time to support this and to help their people, absolutely correct. But if you don't have that human touch and that human interaction and helping somebody nudge, it's your Fitbit and Fit coach. I think a good colleague of mine said, you need both working in tandem. You need the technology to support you and provide that insight and knowledge to help you and educate you, but you need the human personal training saying, come on, you signed up for this. Why aren't you doing this? Come on, if you do this, you know that you'll get to where you need to be. So I think for me, it's been really important about having tech and touch as the two bits. You need the human interaction. And then just to double down on some of the things, I think when I wrote them down here as we were going through, it's like the squiggles, not ladders, I think is really important. It's not your traditional career paths that people are following now. So embrace that, especially when you come to different generations. Aspirations as well as skills. Make sure that we're understanding our employees' aspirations and career aspirations, as well as we're actually understanding the skills they have from a previous role and what they want to try and do going forward. The third thing for me was that speed and direction. We've got to help individuals understand their speed and direction within their career. I think that's really important for people to navigate their way through the business. And maybe, and I don't want to be too cheeky with this, but maybe think about development rather than mobility. Think about development, the mobility being a vehicle that can help you develop and upskill and reskill. You will have people that will want to move into a new job today or tomorrow, and that's absolutely correct. But you'll have lots of people that want the experience and the skill set and everything else that mobility or secondment or a gig economy could actually provide that to them. And also do not forget that work-life balance has become the number one thing at the moment, above everything else, equal to pay. So when they are training and how you're creating time for them to upskill and reskill becomes even more of a priority for you. So hopefully that helps, Ben, and summarizes some of the things that we've talked about.
Wonderful. I have some incredible notes. I have some great takeaways from this as well. And it's my hope that everyone else does. Thank you so much for joining, Martin, for sharing your ideas, your passion, your wisdom for this space. It's clear that you've seen some great examples of this, maybe probably like all of us, some not so great examples of this, and have pulled some good nuggets from that to share with all of us here. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you for your time, Ben.
Absolutely. To everybody else, I hope you got some great and very practical ideas to help with your own internal ability approaches. Go out there, serve your employees, support the business, and we appreciate you for joining us.